Well, I am absolutely delighted to have Bea Perez, actually call her Bea.
Bea, yep. And I'm help instead of Angel.
One senior executive with Coca-Cola, our closest neighbor in a company, obviously, that is an iconic global company, but also an iconic Atlanta company. And we've basically grown up together as institutions. I mean, physically and pretty much almost historically, and with incredible ties that would take us too long to review. But I'm delighted, and I'm also delighted because we are taping this conversation right ahead of SDG Week. And as many of you know, Georgia Tech was one of the co-founders of the University Global Coalition, which we partner with like-minded institutions to try to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And one key part of the Sustainable Development Goals is the notion of partnerships. That we're not successfully with all the issues that we face only from whether it's governments alone or academia alone, that we need everybody, including, very importantly, businesses. And in addition to being our neighbors, Coca-Cola has a long history of doing very interesting and impactful things in the broad area of sustainability. So thank you for agreeing to do this.
Thank you for having me.
This is intriguing. So I was going to ask you first to ground us, to give us examples of some of this technical term, the coolest things that that Coca-Cola is doing around the world. I know you do a ton of work in the area of water resources. You do a ton of work in the area of packaging. You do a ton of work also, of course, in climate and emissions. Give us examples of some of the coolest things that you guys do.
Okay, so our definition of cool might be very different, because I'm going to actually start with process is actually what makes us cool around the world, because we can't actually create 100% rPET, so bottle to bottle, without actually having really strong processes inside. I know that's not glamorous to some people or cool to some, but I'd say...
Remember, we're engineering.
You're engineering,
so we're with you.
So I like charts as well. Yeah. But what I discovered at Coke, because I was the first chief sustainability officer back in 2011 when there really weren't too many of us. And I was pulled out of business operations to do this, to help embed it into the business. And what I noticed is we actually had a lot of really cool things going on. We were replenishing the water in the marketplace. We were creating new bottles, using less plastic. However, it would be highly dependent on the person who initiated the project. And then if that person moved on, then the project might shut down or go away. And so what I said is, well, how can we make sure that this is truly integrated and we measure it the same way we do as the business? So the coolest thing I think we did is actually started with enterprise risk and then looked at growth opportunity, laid them together, and embedded this into business planning. And so that required rigor. So some people think I'm a little nuts when I say this, but it meant we went from 75 publicly stated goals to about 10. And because we said what really matters to the world, what matters to the business, how do we bring it together, set targets that we can measure and track, embed all the way through to compensation. But there are some really other cool things too. Like one really cool thing that's here in Atlanta taking place with some of our plastic bottles. As we know, the plastic waste pollution issue is a real problem. We want to use as little plastic as possible. So lightweighting was one way to do it. But I don't know how many of you ever opened up a water bottle and it kind of crunches, right? So that's not great. And for those engineers, think about stacking the pallets. What happens if the bottles are too flimsy? They crush. And so then we have to, it's a lot of waste. And so we said, how can we get rid of that? And our brilliant scientists, we have a great chief technical officer, Nancy Kwan, Dr. Kwan, she invented, and didn't invent, I think her scientist team invented, they found a glass liner that is literally 1/1000th of a strand of hair in size that you can line the bottle with. So you could take out as much plastic as possible. You put this liner in, it's fully recyclable. And then you actually have shelf-stable bottles. It took our packaging on shelf from about 12 weeks to almost 6 months life shelf, which is great, so it can be out there longer. It also helped enable us to remove every single year 9,100 tons of plastic out of the marketplace in Europe alone. So that's really cool to me because, I'm sure all the students who really work on these things say, well, how will this turn into something for business or society. Imagine someone inventing something that is literally 1/1000th of a strand of hair that actually is removing the amount of plastic like that. So for me, that's a really cool thing. Those are the things that we talk about to certain individuals, but I have found that talking to Gen Z, and I guess Gen Alpha is the next, right? So I don't know which group you all are in over here, but has been something that really inspires them, and they get really excited. And so we've started to also learn how to make sure that students and academics actually are part of this partnership, and that we tell the story as well, but we engage students to help us be better.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, we do some work in fascinating work in renewable bioproducts, right? I actually went through a tutorial the other day, which was fantastic, by the way, on how to turn wood into materials that help us do these things without having to wait for billions of dollars, billions of years for the wood to become fossil that then can be turned into this. And it's fascinating. So, and I saw in some of your reports that you are working on things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we are.
Any exciting progress on that front?
Well, even from, I don't know if you've heard of keel clips. And so you used to think of when you would have cans and you'd use the plastic rings to connect them. Instead, we said, well, how do we get rid of those? They're actually bad for animals in the oceans, or also it's just too much plastic waste. And so how do we get rid of it? And so we started working with companies to take wood or cardboard and actually create sort of the connectors and use those. And so we have found that consumers really love that. And it also has a second and third life, which is interesting. Some students have even turned it into art. So we have found that by innovating in that space and having academics work with us and scientists work with us and say, here's a different use for this after you use it for your products, we have found that we're able to wire into different foundations and organizations to also bring the materials to them as well.
So before we get into, I also want to talk about water, which I know is central to you, but that's interesting because you mentioned by doing this work, not only you're doing something that is important to build a more sustainable future, but you said, hey, the new generation of talent recognize that as a plus, so it helps you attract consumers, yes, hopefully more and more. To people who may argue that businesses should not do any of this stuff, that, hey, you as a business, all you should do is make your product, make money, turn a good profit to shareholders. What do you tell them? Why does Coca-Cola do this stuff?
Yes, so and we get a lot of that, but it's a very polarized world out there, should we say. But they're missing the point on what people actually want. And so if you look at data, which we like to look at data, this next generation of consumers says this is table stakes. We're not purchasing brands that we don't feel good about and that do damage to the environment. And so if you're not building in sustainability from day one into your business, but let me just give some practical examples. So think of Coke. If we're not working on water, there's no beverage business. You cannot produce a beverage without using water. And imagine what happened to us, and actually I'm headed off to India this afternoon, so this is why this reminds me of this. In 2000, we had opened up new facilities in India, and all of a sudden we found that there were protesters everywhere. And, I'm going to say something now that's going to sound counterintuitive, but our scientists said, yeah, but we're not depleting the water of that community, so how come they're protesting us? Well, because also there's an emotional piece, too, for consumers. They saw the big red trucks driving by their communities. That direct community where the facility opened was not in a drought. The one next door was. So the community next door would see our trucks go by and say, how come there's water for them and not water for us? And so we can't actually open up our business and grow our business unless we're thinking of water for people first. It is a lifeblood of every single community, and being mindful of our water use. And so today we replenish 159% of the water we use. There's lots of things that make that up because we're working to use less water in our business and our operations, all the way through to what goes into the packages, but all the way through to making sure we're actually putting infrastructure into local communities. But that was a lesson learned. As a matter of fact, our former chairman and CEO, Muhtar Kent, wrote a blog about it. And he said that was our wake-up call on water, which is we forgot that actually water was so much bigger than us and that it was really critical to consumers. And so when people come and say to us, well, business should not be focused on these kinds of things, leave that up to academics, NGOs, we say, well, actually, this is our business. If we're going to use water and a resource in our business that people need, then we have to be mindful of the use. And so we're very clear. We said, well, how do we make sure that we're doing the right things as well? And so we talk a lot to academics, to investors, to NGOs, to governments, and we say, what are the issues that you think, we can naturally be a part of solving, which are the ones that were part of the problem? And we overlay these charts, and then we come out with a map, which is in our sustainability report, that says, while we can't do everything, we're going to focus on water because it's in our products. We're going to work on packaging because you can't deliver a beverage without packaging. And then the intersection around carbon, because if you think of water and plastics, almost 60% of the work that water and packaging is actually about reducing carbon. And so when we turn this into our PET or a plant bottle, we're using significantly less carbon and we're using less energy. And that's good for us as a business. We save money. It's also really good for society because we're actually creating less of an issue, but we're also helping to solve a problem with others. And partnership is key.
So if you were to give us a tour of the most advanced, latest bottling plant anywhere in the world that you have just opened, and compared it to sort of an average bottling plant like 20 years ago, what would it be? What kinds of things you would show us to really brag about this?
It's night and day. And so there's actually, you can see two tales of the story here in Georgia and the Atlanta community. If you go, I'd say, further north, you're going to see one that's a little bit older and outdated that they're working on right now. If you go over towards the airport, you're going to see one that is brand new, latest technology. Today, it doesn't use water to wash the bottles anymore. It uses light technology.
I read in some of your materials that you, as a company, are or want to be a total beverage company. What does that mean? That seems like I want to be a total university or something. That sounds very, very cool. What is a total beverage company?
Yes. So most people don't realize that we actually have always been a total beverage business. We just never declared it. And so most people think of us as Coca-Cola, regular Coke trademark. And for many years, we've been in water, we've been in juices, Minute Maid juice. And so it was a realization that actually the world is changing, consumer needs are changing. How do we make sure that people know that the portfolio is all the Coca-Cola Company? And so we declared it because if you think about a consumer typically drinks 8 drinks a day, there's different needs. So you might have your breakfast, but before we didn't have a coffee. That is one thing we acquired, Costa Coffee. And we said, well, now we have a coffee if you want a coffee, or Minute Maid juice for your juice in the morning. Midday, I know I want a Diet Coke. I drink all the Cokes, by the way. So that's my energy boost, By lunch, though, I want a regular Coke with my spicy meal or with my hamburger or hot dog. And all the way through to, and this might surprise you, even late evening, say you're going out with some friends and you want to toast using an alcoholic beverage, responsibly, of course. We also now have that in our portfolio, so we have Jack and Coke. We knew that was it was the number one drink that was mixed, Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola. And we said, actually, we're not capturing that profit pool. Why not? And so we partner now with Brown-Forman to actually make Jack and Coke and bring it in a can. Great taste, and people love it. So we go through all the occasions throughout your day because we want to make sure we're the company capturing that need in a responsible way.
My new favorite, Topo Chico.
It's so good, isn't it? Now, which one?
What?
Which one? We have Topo Chico waters. We have Topo Chico with lime waters. We have Topo Chico hard seltzer.
Oh, no, I do the normal.
See?
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure before your students write down, he drinks Topo Chico hard seltzer.
Topo Chico water with all the bubbles. It's really, really awesome.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. So the question for students, I think you've already given us some hints that I think are very valuable for faculty working in different areas. In a way, reaffirms a lot of the work that we do. But for students who may be thinking, wait, do I go into business, get a good job with a good pay, or do I go somewhere else where I can change the world in a way that is meaningful to me, but I may not have, it may be a riskier career, right?
They're not mutually exclusive, is what I'd say. I think the best leaders of the future are tri-sector leaders. So they're the leaders who actually work in multiple sectors. You pick which ones you want, but government, business, academic, or NGOs, because they're getting a lens from community, from policy, and from how business operates. So for Coke, we like when students don't have to come to business first. We like to recruit in students who have different internships in different areas, who understand policy and how it impacts people, who maybe have worked on some community initiatives, but also who are business-minded and recognize that business can help solve problems because business has resources. And so when businesses make money, businesses can contribute that money back to really solve real-world problems at scale. And that's what I think is probably different in corporations, or at least multinationals. We can solve problems at scale versus maybe just thinking of a small pocket of a community. But, you know, we want the talent of the future. I want all the Georgia Tech alums come our way, because I think that you all have some of the most brilliant minds coming out of this university, and we've seen it when we hire them into our populations, and they contribute quite a bit.
One, thank you for that message to students. One last question that has always intrigued me, as obviously a person with an international life story myself, how perhaps one of the most uniquely American iconic companies, brands like Coca-Cola, it doesn't get much more American than that. It's also one of the most global companies. How come you can build a company that is so at the same time global, not just in brand, but in culture, and so American at the same time? Just tell us a little bit about
So American and so local. We employ locally, we produce and manufacture locally, we distribute locally, and we have local bottling companies. And so while we're a global brand up here, and you know, some people laugh and they're like, you're in Atlanta, Georgia, that's in the South. How can you be such a global brand in the South? Why not like London or Hong Kong or wherever? And it's amazing what Coke has been able to do. So we own at the company side the brands and the recipes. Then we work in partnership, which we started in partnerships earlier, with bottling companies who then package it all together, work with customers, and get it in the hands of consumers. What has happened around the world, and the beauty of the Coke business and why we're global and local at the same time, is because most of them were family-run businesses in these local countries. And so, you know, Robert Woodruff used to say, we want to make sure that a Coke is within arm's reach of desire people. And so that's why we built these businesses all around the world, building local partnerships, which actually helps drive the economy, create jobs. We pay taxes locally. And so I love that in some places it's this American ideal, but when you go to local countries, they own it, and they will let you know, this is our brand, this is our company. And so it's a pretty cool thing that when you travel around the world and you see, it's not a place you can't find a Coca-Cola. There's only 3 countries we don't operate in, but I can tell you that if you went there, you'd probably still find a Coke. So it's been very interesting because we're global, and I think that the culture at Coke has always been about society and putting people first, but we still have increased our dividend year over year to our shareholders.
Trust me, I know. And in fact, most of you know the story, but if not, I think anybody related to Georgia Tech should know the story. To this day, the largest, most generous donor the Institute has ever had was a woman by the name of Letty Pate Evans, Whitehead Evans.
That's right.
She and her husband were the ones who started the bottling business.
Yes.
And
she was the president of the international bottling business. Mm-hmm.
First woman to serve on the corporate board of a major company in the United States. And when she passed away, she created a trust, which is at the time was 100% invested in Coca-Cola shares. And Georgia Tech is one of the highest beneficiaries. So to this day, I think that piece of that trust that supports Georgia Tech is worth, I think, around $550 million.
Yes.
So when there's a dividend payout from this company, I get a nice check in my office. I physically get a check.
Not to him, to the university.
And this money goes into scholarships. Many of the things we build, many of the things that happen in this campus. And in fact, every time I see you and your boss, I thank you for those great dividend payouts. But it's yeah.
You know what's interesting about that is, so every couple of years when you have a new CEO, and I've been at Coke 30 years, so I've been through about 4 or 5 of them. The first thing they always do is say, how can we change or refresh the mission of the company? And there's this whole long exercise that goes on. And if you look all the way back to Robert Woodruff, it's actually never. They always come to the same exact place. And now I just kind of laugh when we go through the exercise. I'm like, I know we're going to land, but they still have to go through it themselves. But it's always refresh the world and make a difference. No one ever cuts off the and make a difference because of that exact fact. Because back in the early days, Robert Woodruff and then Goizueta used to say, we need to create wealth for other peoples because that's how we're going to know we're also partially making a difference. And then when we create that wealth, and it was Goizueta who actually created the Coca-Cola Foundation, he said, then we also need to agree to give 1% of our operating income back annually to these communities. And so it's good for people, good for business, but refresh the world, which is about the beverage business, and make a difference, which is how we really are able to be welcomed into communities, has always been a part of the culture and the DNA. And you see it through every chairman and CEO that's come in, through every leadership team. It's the one thing that stays constant and true, is making sure that it's always people first.
I can't thank you enough, and I hope that yes, when you in addition to the amazing work that you just shared in terms of building a more sustainable future for everybody, that even on the economic side, when you publish those financial results, that financial profit is making a difference in all sorts of nonprofits and academic institutions like this one. So for your role, your very important role in all of that, I thank you. And thank you so much for coming to Georgia Tech right as we are to celebrate our SDG week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the partnership.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.